topic this morning is, how strong are you? And one of the most important things, and as a teacher, is to get the students participating. So I thought about bringing my weights up, my Olympic weights that I used to have. I don't have them anymore. The big steel bar, 30-pound bar, and then you have the weights on it. And we could all do arm curls and bench presses and clean and jerks, and we could see how strong everybody was and get everybody participating in it. But I think after the lesson today, we'll find out that's not the kind of strength we're talking about. However, to get you involved, I would like to ask you to take some notes if you could. We're going to have a lot of biblical verses, and I don't have time. We don't have time unless you want to take time, and I don't think you do. Half hour I was told was the max. We don't have time to really get into the verses and look at how those affect our lives. But I think all the verses we have this morning are very, very important to each of us. The scripture reading this morning, hopefully you noticed in Joshua 1, 6, and 7, was twice Joshua was told to be strong and courageous. We're going to find out that 2 verses later, he's told again the exact same thing. 3 times in 4 verses, he's told to be strong and courageous. And we're going to find out as we go through today that over and over and over, people in the Bible were told to be strong. And I think they're talking to us, too. God's talking to us when he tells us to be strong. So that both the topic of the sermon today and the encouragement for you is to be strong. If you write the verses down, you can go home and study them. I think we can find out that can really impact our lives. It's interesting, since I started studying this, I've seen this topic come up over and over in my life. What I'd like to do first is just give you an outline of what we're going to do today so you can kind of follow along. That's one thing you're supposed to do as a teacher. So we're going to look at Joshua 1 first, about being strong and courageous, and then we're going to look at the world's definition of strength. In the world and in the Bible, we see this worldly definition. Then we're going to look at the true definition of strength. From Joshua, in Joshua chapter 1, then from the dictionary, and then from Bible verses. And lastly, we're going to look at true strength in our lives every single day. How do we find out that we can increase our strength? How do we deal with daily problems with a strength? And lastly, do we have godly examples of how to overcome problems? It was interesting, I started on this topic, strength, and as I did, the Olympics were on. And of course, there's all the strong people. When the world thinks of strength, it can impact, when we think of strength, it can impact the way we read the Bible. If we look at Joshua chapter 1, we're going to look at the first 9 verses. Verses 1 through 5 says, so Joshua 1, 1 through 5. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all of the land of the Hittites to the great sea, toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. It seems pretty clear here. Joshua is going to lead an army to take over the promised land. This is a time in which power and strength are crucial. I think we would all agree with that. If you're going to go in and you're just going to take over all these different nations, God is promising power and strength to Joshua. In verses 6, 7, and 9, he's told 3 times to be strong and courageous. It seems like strength and courage is super important to God's leader here. We think of strength this way, and the world does. And in the world, we think of strength as people like Arnold Schwarzenegger. At age 20, he was Mr. Universe. 7 times he was Mr. Olympia. We think of, in our comics and things, the Hulk. The more mad you get, the more anger you have, the stronger you get. And he can lift tons and tons. We think of people like Chuck Norris. I don't know how many of you are familiar with how popular Chuck Norris is and his strength and how unbeatable he is. There's a lot of memes, which I don't do the meme thing, but it's kind of interesting. Chuck Norris is the reason Waldo is hiding. Chuck Norris counted to infinity twice. Chuck Norris once won a game of Connect 4 in 3 moves. When Chuck Norris does a push-up, he's pushing the earth down. Chuck Norris doesn't wear a watch, he decides what time it is. He's the only man to ever defeat a brick wall in a game of tennis. And he can cook minute rice in 30 seconds. And this is our idea, kind of a far-fetched notion of what we think of strength, though. Just unbeatable, just super strong, like Arnold Schwarzenegger looked. If you've ever seen any of his pictures of Mr. Olympia, it's muscle on top of muscle on top of muscle. We think of that, and Joshua is being told to be strong and courageous. That would really fit into our world today. In the Bible, there's some examples of that kind of strength. I was like, man, this is going to be easy. I'm going to just get all kinds of really strong men in the Bible. And as I started looking, I found 3. The first, of course, is Samson. Samson in Judges 14, 5 and 6. Suddenly a young lion came roaring at him, and the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands as one would tear a young goat. I can't tear a young goat apart, but anyway, I was thinking it's more like a couple of us that grew up on a farm would know it's like skinning a squirrel or a rabbit. A little slice across the stomach, you can go like this, and it's skinned. Well, that's what Samson did to this lion. He just, no problem, he killed the lion. That's strength in the world's view. In Judges 15, 13 through 15, so they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. When Samson arrived in Lehi, the Philistines came out shouting against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. The ropes on his arms became like burnt flax, and the bonds broke loose from his hands. He found the fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand and took it, and struck down 1,000 men. This is the epitome of world strength. You just grab a jawbone and kill 100 people, 1,000 people, 1,000 men, 1,000 army men. And in Judges 16:3, but Samson lay there only until midnight, and when he got up, he took hold of the doors of the city gate and both gateposts and pulled them out, bar and all. Then he put them on his shoulders and took them to the top of the mountain overlooking Hebron. And the last example that I have of Samson was in Judges 16, 27 through 30. Now the temple was full of men and women, although the lords of the Philistines were there. And about 3,000 men and women were on the roof watching Samson entertain them. Then Samson called out to the Lord, "O Lord God, please remember me. Strengthen me, O God, just once more, so that with one vengeful blow I may pay back the Philistines for my 2 eyes." And Samson reached out for the 2 central pillars supporting the temple. Bracing himself against them with his right hand on one pillar and his left hand on the other, Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all of his might, and the temple fell on the lords and all the people in it. So in his death he killed more than he had killed in his entire life. Here's an example of the earthly definition of strength, and that's through Samson. Another example I found from the Bible is in 2 Samuel 23, 8 through 38. And we're not going to read all that. I'm going to read 8, 9, and 10. These are the names of the mighty men whom David had: Josheb-Bashebeth, a Tachmonite. He was the chief of the three. He wielded his spear against 800 whom he killed at one time. And next to him among the three mighty men was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the son of Ahohai. He was with David when they defied the Philistines who were gathered there for battle, and the men of Israel withdrew. He rose and struck down the Philistines until his hand was weary and his hand clung to the sword. And the Lord brought about a great victory that day. If you read there in 2 Samuel, it's the names of the mighty men and how great they were and how strong and how mighty. And the final example I found in the Bible was the man with the demon in the region of the Gerasenes. This man had been living in this is Mark 5, 1 through 20. I'll just read verses 3 and 4. Mark 5, 1 through 20. This man had been living in the tombs and could no longer be restrained, even with chains. Though he was often bound with chains and shackles, he had broken the chains and shattered the shackles. Now there was no one with the strength to subdue him. So there are examples of this real muscular strength in the Bible, but not really many. Does that rule us out? Are these verses about Joshua only and these other men and no one else? Does strong muscles really equal, or does strength really equal muscles? In Joshua chapter 1, he was told to be strong 3 times. So let's take a look at that. 3 times he's told to be strong and courageous, but I think we'll find out that none of the 3 is talking about muscular strength. Joshua 1, verse 6. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. How? How's he going to lead the people to inherit the promised land? Is he going to go in and with his strength and his fighting take over other armies? No, the generals back then usually stood back and directed the things. It wasn't his strength that was going to do it. It was going to be God working through Joshua to get this. And what's interesting is what's the result of if he does this, if he's strong and courageous? The promised land. And that's the same for us. If we are strong and courageous, we have that promise waiting for us. In verse 7, it says, only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. So in Joshua 1:7, he's told again to be strong and courageous, but there's nothing in there about muscles. It's about following God's law. Be strong in following the law. How are we going to do that? If we follow his law with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, then what's the result? The result there, it said, was that you will have good success. If we do that, we have a promise. And in verse 9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. There's nothing in there about strength with muscles. The strength there is trusting in God. Don't be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord God is with you wherever you go. And it's interesting that the result, the reward we get, is there the whole time. God is with us. But the result of our strength is we're aware of God's strength and his being with us. And that can give us something that we can't on our own. It seems as if strong is not about strength or muscles here at all. And yet if we look at the dictionary, it's kind of confusing because the very first definition in the Oxford Dictionary is an adjective, having the power to move heavy weights or perform other physically demanding tasks. Or in Merriam-Webster, the meaning of strong is having or marked by great physical power. The definition of strong is in muscular, having muscles capable of exerting great physical force. An example of that is I need some strong people to help me move furniture. So the very first definition in the Bible is what we usually think of strength, and that's muscles and being very, very strong. They give synonyms: muscular, powerful, mighty, rugged, stout, sturdy, masculine. And the antonyms, the opposite of that, are weak, feeble, delicate, frail. So that's the very first definition, and it seems like maybe strong is using your muscles and being very strong that physically. But if we keep looking, we see that there's actually 9 more definitions of strong in Merriam-Webster. The second one is as strong as in sturdy, able to withstand hardship, strain, or exposure. Example of that is the doctor soon found her strong enough to go home from the hospital. These examples of this are hardy, tough, stout, vigorous, and the opposites are weak, soft, delicate. So we find this strength is inside us. It's able to withstand hardship or strain. Another one, as in rich, having the abundance of some characteristic, such as flavor, such as strong coffee, is the example they give. Rich, robust, potent. The opposite of that is weak, thin, mild, light. Another example, or another definition, is powerful, having great power or influence. And the example they give is a time when the team needed a strong leader. It means powerful or influential, significant, and the opposites are weak, insignificant, powerless, helpless. There's some more definitions in there and it just keeps going on and on. Strong can mean many, many things to us. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at true strength. As we noted, there are some examples in the Bible of Samson's strength, of muscles, but there are very few. Not only are there examples, but there's also some just verses that in the Bible talking about that kind of strength. In Psalm 38:19, it says, "But my foes are vigorous, and they are mighty, and many are those who hate me wrongfully." So David's concerned here about strong foes, the mighty people that are against him. Even Jesus mentions this type of strength in Mark 3:27. "No one can bind a strong man's house and plunder his goods, unless he first binds the strong man, and then indeed he may plunder his house." Or in the Bible, there's also sometimes where we perceive things as strong, and they're not really sources of strength. Proverbs 18:11, "A rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall is in his imagination." And in Deuteronomy 8:17 and 18, "Beware lest you say in your heart, 'My power and my might of my hand have gotten me this wealth.' You shall therefore remember that the Lord your God, it is he who gives you power." So there's some examples of people in the Bible with this muscular type of strength, and there's some verses in there, but let's look at true strength. There's another kind of strength, as we saw in Joshua chapter 1, that when he's told to be strong, it's another kind of strength, and that's what we're going to focus on now. This is what we need to incorporate in our lives. This is the strength that we can use in our life and can help us when we need strength and courage. What does the Old and New Testament tell us about this kind of strength? In Isaiah 40, 29 through 31. So now I'm going to list quite a few verses here. You might just, if you can take them down, write them down. If not, just try to listen for key things about strength and power and where we get them from. Isaiah 40, 29 through 31. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Psalm 27:14. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Psalm 28:7 and 8. The Lord is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts, and I am helped. My heart exalts, and with my song I give thanks to him. The Lord is the strength of his people. He is the saving refuge of his anointed. And Psalm 31:24. Be strong and let your heart take courage, all of you who wait for the Lord. To women in Proverbs 31:17. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. 1 Corinthians 16:13. Be watchful, firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Ephesians 6:10 through 19. I'm only going to read 10 through 13. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you might be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Take up, therefore, the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. We are to be strong, but not the earthly kind of strength. In Psalms 33:13 through 19, the Lord looks down from heaven. He sees all the children of man. Let's skip to verse 16. The king is not saved by his great army. An warrior is not delivered by his great strength. The war horse is a false hope for salvation, and by its great might, it cannot rescue. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his steadfast love, that he may deliver their soul from death and keep them alive in the famine. Psalm 44:6 and 7. For not in my bow do I trust, nor my sword can save me, but you have saved us from our foes. There is a greater strength in this earthly strength. We find it in Ephesians 3:14 through 20. I'm going to start in verse 16. That according to the riches of his glory, he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with the fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all that we ask or think, according to the power at work within us, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus through all generations, forever and ever. and Ephesians 1:18 through 21. That you may know what is the hope to which he has called you, what are the riches of his glorious inheritance in saints, and what is the immeasurable greatness of his power toward us who believe according to the working of his great might. And Hebrews chapter 11, verses 32 through 37. And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson, Jephthah and David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced judgments, obtained promises, stopped the mouth of lions, quenched the powers of fire, escaped the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead from resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned and sawn in two, and they were killed with a sword. Philippians chapter 4, 11 through 13. And we know verse 13, so I'm going to read that. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So we have examples of Joshua kind of courage and strength. And we see where we get it from. We get it from God. But how do we put it to use in our lives? Do we need this in our lives? The one thing, I could have had everyone come up and lift weights, but what I think, as I thought about it, every single one of us in here needs strength and courage. In our own ways, in our own trials, in our lives, every single one of us has that. I really saw this. I went to see my sister, who's an older sister, and my mom down in Memphis, Tennessee, last couple of weeks. And my sister was saying, I can't keep up with all these plants. She has flowers everywhere, but it takes weeding and you have to get up and down and pull, and it's 90 degrees outside. And she said, I can't do what I used to. And of course, I've heard that from my grandparents, my parents, all your life you've heard, I'm getting old and I can't do it. So I'm talking to the older people now. We found out that that's true. You can't do some things you can before, and it takes courage to face life when you don't have the energy you used to. When you're older and all of your friends have died or moved away. When you can't hear as well as you could or remember as well as you could. Or it hurts to move. It hurts to get up and, if you sit too long or if you stand too long. All of these things are real trials and real difficulties, and you need strength to get through every single day. And I see that in some people in my life who are now older, in their 90s, and they're alone. They feel like there's no one there. Because their husband or the wife died, their friends have moved or died, and there's no one to really understand them, they feel. And it's very difficult, and they need strength to get through the day. What about some of the rest of us who have the daily grind? You just go to work every day, you come home, and you're tired. It's the same thing. You're working for someone else. You're not working for yourself. You try to focus on God and what's important, and yet all you do day after day after day, you're like in a treadmill or a little, the little mouse in the wheel going around and round and nowhere to go. We need strength to get through the daily grind just day after day. Perhaps you're taking care of someone, a loved one, an older person, or someone younger than you that is disabled in some way. You need strength to get through it. It's hard, day after day, the same thing, and people, you feel like they don't understand, that you're tied. My sister's, there with my mom, and she's there basically 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. She has a difficulty going to the grocery store, and feeling fine. I can just go. When you have people to take care of, or perhaps sons or daughters, and you have to feed them and clothe them, and it's difficult. We need courage to get through that. What about people when tragedy happens? Someone you love gets cancer or gets injured in a car wreck, or so many things. These tragedies can happen. You can't see God working in your life. We have a lot of difficulties, and we do need strength. And I think that's addressed in the Bible, and he's talking to us when he tells all these people in the Bible, and he tells us, be strong and courageous. Let's look at some people in the Bible to see if they had the same thing. Did they have those problems? And the person we're talking about most this morning is Joshua. Did he have that problem? He was told to be strong and courageous. Why would he have to be strong? One of the first things what's the first thing they did when they crossed in the promised land? They went to Jericho. And God told him this nice, clear, strong way to just wipe out the city, right? Can you see Joshua I can't see Joshua saying, oh, okay, I understand. God's saying march around this city once a day for 6 days and then 7 times on the 7th day. Is that God being clear to him? Or does he need strength to trust God and do that? Sometimes we can't see God working in our lives. We pray and we can't see the answer. And say, I can't see where's God at? Well, what did Joshua have to think? He's told to take an entire, innumerable people almost, and go around a city and just walk around it. 7 days of marching. Maybe we don't understand how God is working as he is. Job, are you having problems or adversity? We talked about that, sickness or losing money or death or losing loved ones. Job faced all of those. And yet how did he face it? He faced it with courage, saying God is in control. I don't understand. God is. How about Ruth? Ruth lost her husband, her father-in-law, her brother-in-law. She's supposed to follow a God that she doesn't know. She has to go to a foreign land. She has to pick grain on the side pick up what other people has dropped. She did not have a nice, easy highway saying, this is the way you go and everything's going to turn out right. You have to have strength. David and Goliath. Is there real muscles in that other than Goliath? No, it's trust in God. David trusted in God to go up against impossible odds and problems that are too big to face. Sometimes we have problems that seem too big to face. Daniel in the lion's den. Where's the strength there? I would count on the lions. And yet David's being mistreated for doing what he's supposed to do. He's doing what God told him to do, and he's about to die for it. He's showing his strength by doing that anyway. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they're willing to die to do what God told them. So in our life today, if we're trying to do what's right, and other people are making it hard for us, we want to go to church and somebody says, no, you don't need to tonight, or let's do this or that. Or if you want to study the Bible or anything, sometimes we need to remember these people who are really strong and these examples. And Joseph, do you have family problems? Maybe that's the thing that we need to have strength through. We have sons or daughters or wives or somebody that are contentious, or just we're having difficulty with the family, or maybe you're all alone, or maybe somebody else has lied about you. All of those things are exactly Joseph's story. He had family problems. He was all alone and in a foreign land, and he had other people lie about him and have him thrown into prison. And yet he was strong. He did what God wanted, and look at the end result. The last thing I'd like for us to look at is God's choices. In Matthew chapter 4, 1 through 11, Jesus had choices to make. Hopefully you remember what happened in Matthew 4, 1 through 11. Jesus had just been baptized, and he went out and hadn't eaten in 40 days. And he has to show strength in his choices. He can turn the stones to bread easily. He could jump off and the angels would keep him from being hurt. He could bow down and win all the countries of the entire world. But he didn't. He chose what's right because he chose the true power to follow God. In Matthew 26:53, Jesus showed strength. All he had to do was ask God to send 12 legions of angels, and he could have been freed. Instead, he died on the cross for us. Instead, in the garden, he said, "Not my will, but your will." Today we sang, "The battle belongs to the Lord," and "Be still and know." Those are what we need to do. We need to see where true strength comes from. We know in 1 Timothy 4:8 it says that bodily exercise is good for you, but there's something more important than that, and that's spiritual exercise. I'd like you to hopefully look at the verses that I gave you today and discuss them or study them and see what true strength really is. We looked at Joshua chapter 1, we looked at Psalms 27, 31, and Ephesians 6. There's even a lot more verses that I didn't go over. Deuteronomy 31, 6, 2 Chronicles 32, 7, Daniel 10, 19, Haggai 2, 4, 2 Timothy 1, 7. We looked at strength, and we see that strength is not muscles. In fact, it's nothing to do with us. It's God working through us, and the strength of our decision to follow God. If you want to be stronger, if you need to get strength from God and others around you, you should come forward and make that known. Or if you've never confessed, repented, been baptized into true strength, come as we stand the invitation song.